let this information out.
The most enduring experiments have been in the field of remote viewing. We got into it when we discovered that they were in it.
I realized that what people can do is quiet their mind and describe the experiences that appear in your awareness.
We've been investigating a phenomenon called remote viewing. We found that many individuals are able to accurately describe what's going on in distant locations, blocked from any kind of ordinary perception.
Don't name it, just tell me what appears in your visual field, and then draw that.
Are you saying that the work you've been doing is classified?
I really can't talk about matters of classification, as you can imagine.
My name is Russell Targ, and I'm a physicist.
But the water's a little bit murky. So I'm going to change to a bigger fly that they can see better. Oh, there we go. We got one.
So what do you do with it after you catch it?
Catch and release only. The cutthroats are now pretty endangered, so you can't keep them. Where the red is, it's like his throat's been cut.
Yeah.
Ken Kress was our long-term contract monitor at CIA. He was a physicist. Ken Kress became a mythic figure when he wrote a long paper in Annals of Intelligence describing our program, but he's never come forward.
Kress had never been interviewed before this film, and every question we asked had to be submitted for vetting by the CIA.
I was undercover. The fact that CIA was even doing anything with SRI was confidential information.
Several months after this all occurred, George Bush, the first, becomes CIA director. I get a call from the DCI's, George Bush's office, and she says, "Oh, Director Bush would like to hear about a project that you were involved in called parapsychology." This was a recommendation from John McMahon, who was the deputy director of CIA at that point. Hung up the phone. Well, about an hour or two later, the office director's standing in front of my desk, rather flush and kind of forcefully says, "Kress, you're going to give that briefing, but I'm going with you. You're not going to give that briefing alone." So I said, "Hey, fine, whatever." Weeks later, we're sitting in the DCI's office about 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so, and we're supposed to have this briefing, and nothing happens. 5 o'clock rolls around, and the secretary comes on and says, "Well, I can't tell you how long it's going to be, but he said he really wants to hear your briefing if you could stay around." And, so we sit there at 7 o'clock in the office with nothing but the security guard, because now it's, late at night. Finally, George Bush comes out. He said, "I want to hear this briefing." He said, can you stay around and give it?" "Sure." Do you need to have a projector?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I have a lot of images, and it would be kind of hard to talk about them without, showing the images." And he said, "Well, okay, the staff is gone." He said, "But I know where the viewgraph machine is. It's around here somewhere. I'll find it." And so he gets up and goes and rummages around in the closets, and he finds the viewgraph machine. He rolls it out and gets down on his hands and knees on the floor to plug it in while I'm sitting there focusing it. And my office director is sitting on the couch just kind of watching all this until he realizes that he's in a kind of an awkward situation. He's the only one not doing anything in the room. And he starts to look for something to do, and finally we get everything put together. George actually asked a question or two that I don't remember what they were, but I thought they were pretty insightful questions. before I could get a word out of my mouth, the office director answered me. So George sat back, we got through the briefing, and he said, "This is kind of an interesting set of issues, I'll get back to you." Never heard from him again. The end game is this big review occurs and 4 conclusions come out of it. First of all, the ORD project officers, which were given the authority by the office director to make decisions, say, the research was not productive, not competent, and therefore all research activities at SRI should be dropped. Second conclusion was, because of the mixed results, the operational utility and the capabilities that I was getting demonstrated with SRI was questionable, but it deserved more testing. The third conclusion was, all operations-oriented testing from a contractor like SRI should stop. And a personal services contract with Pat Price was started. So in other words, CIA's decision was because of security concerns, they were going to cut out SRI and work with Pat directly. So they did so. The fourth conclusion was, since I was judged to be positively biased advocate of paranormal functioning and testing, the evaluation of Pat Price would be transferred to a more pragmatic OTS operational psychologist, who was supposedly an experimental psychologist who said that, yeah, you know, I can do more rigorous stuff than, you know, what these SRI guys are doing, and we'll also take a look at some of this psychokinetic stuff, man-machine interaction, and all this kind of thing. We'll put it on a hard scientific basis. And I am out of the picture because I had pushed this stuff onto people hard enough that they concluded that I was biased. In protest to that conclusion, I would say that I believed at the time, and I still believe today, that my motives were, I wanted solid conclusions from this. I was adamant about not quitting before you could get to something more definitive than what we had. But I felt that the things that we had were gold dust in your hand that was dripping through your fingers. And if you didn't somehow or another capture it and make it better, it would just all disappear. And I think that almost, well, it did happen subsequently to CIA. It didn't quite happen that simply in the rest of the government, but that's a whole other story.
The program at SRI was canceled because of its excellence and not because of its shortcomings. So it was a very illuminating trip. You never know who your friends are.
Since I was told by the DCI the project was over, that was it. It was over.
Ken was removed as CIA program manager shortly before Pat Price's death, and he assumes that CIA involvement ended with Price.